Okay, we might get started. Thank you, everybody, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the next 10th anniversary of CATs seminar series. So today it is the turn for Working Group 6. So my name is Dave Copeland. I'm the lead for Working Group 6, which is Cognition and Aphasia, along with Carolina, who's also here. So as the name suggests, our working group's been doing a lot of different forms of research around anything that encapsulates cognition and aphasia. So this includes some work on how to assess cognition in post-stroke aphasia, primary progressive aphasia that you'll be hearing about, cognitive screening and validation of that in various languages, return to work, cognition and treatment responses. So that's just a few of the particular areas. So today we're going to be hearing from Anna Volkmer on primary progressive aphasia, and some work around how to assess language and cognition in this population. And then we'll be hearing after that from Carolina. So this is just a chance for you to get a bit of an update on two of the key projects that our working group has been working on. So welcome, and I'll let Anna take it from here. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me just open the correct set of slides and go to the start. Sorry, oh, my screen sharing's paused. I did it wrong. Hold on. Not wanting to share. Why was that doing that?
It was working before. Oh, there we go.
It was. Did you see it?
No, we saw a blank. Now
that's the one. I don't want you to show you that. Hold on. It literally worked a few moments ago. There you
go. We can see the. Yep, that's it. Wonderful.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
No worries at all.
Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Anna Volkmer, and I know several of you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the project I'm doing, developing a core outcome set for people with primary progressive aphasia. And I always like to start with my collaborations. And as you can see, this is a piece of work that we're undertaking with the CATs group, but I'm also been working with the International PPA Speech and Language Therapy or Pathology Network, which is probably an important group to mention in terms of overlapping and recruiting people to work in this project. So let me just explain why we have been doing this. So the current literature on speech and language therapy interventions for PPA has really developed over the years, and lots of, which is wonderful. Really, the majority of the interventions have been developed in the last 10 years in the research evidence. And there's several different interventions. However, lots of these studies have been published as very small sample sizes or even case studies. And the outcome measures that have been used across these studies are hugely variable. So almost every study has used a different outcome measure. The thing is, PPA or primary progressive aphasia is a rare disease. So yeah, that makes it really difficult to recruit lots and lots of people to a study. But ideally, there is this opportunity that we could, as the literature develops, that we could group some of that data. But to do that, we need we need to be using the same outcomes. But it certainly strengthens outcomes if we have larger sample sizes. Equally, in a clinical setting, if you're able to compare outcomes and have an insight to whether one intervention is delivering something different on the same outcome, we need to be using similar or the same outcomes, really. The other thing, and this is perhaps where I was particularly motivated, is that I was doing some research with people with PPA, developing the Better Conversations communication partner training intervention, And when I asked people about the study afterwards, all the speech therapists and the people with PPA themselves were saying, you're just not measuring the right thing. You're not measuring what is meaningful to us in our daily lives. It's good what you're measuring, but you're not quite getting at the right thing. So I was particularly interested in what people themselves wanted us to measure. And that motivated me to start exploring a core outcome set for PPA. Several of you will know what a core outcome set is. It's an agreed set of measures that are reported in an intervention study in relation to a particular condition. And, you know, they fulfill the things I was mentioning earlier. They allow you to compare across similar trials. They allow you to group data, but they also allow you to reduce bias or selective reporting. And they can, as I mentioned, ensure results are relevant to the people who are affected by these diseases. Now, before I went ahead and just explored developing a core outcome set for PPA, I had to look what was out there already. And there is actually a dementia core outcome set. And they do recommend measuring communication, but that's all they say. They just say, measure the domain of communication as a broad, it lacks, and entirely lacks any specificity. There's also, of course, as almost all of you probably know, is the wonderful Roma. So the core outcome set for people with stroke aphasia. However, that was not developed with people with a progressive disease in mind. And of course, people living with progressive disease are living with very different prognosis and therefore different outcomes that we need to be taking into consideration. So I was motivated to do a core outcome set. And the first thing I did was develop or do a systematic review. So I wanted to know what are all the other studies that have been done in this area, what measures are they actually using? And then I also wanted to know, as I've been really focusing on actually, what was the most important outcome? What were the most important outcomes for people with PPA and their family members? Those are the key stakeholders. I have talked a little bit with clinical speech therapists, but that was a really important outcome, a really important question for me. And then I'm currently in the process of using that to inform a Delphi consensus study where I'm working with researchers to identify what we're going to actually include in the core outcome. So what domains are we, or what constructs are we going to include as outcome constructs, and what measures are we going to use to measure these? And that will inform the dissemination and adoption of a core outcome set. I also anticipate it will inform where there are gaps, and perhaps we might be looking, and this would be wonderful, is looking at development of some new measures. Now, of course, I must emphasize that all of this has been done with real consultation with the patient and public involvement groups that are part of my study. So I thought I'd summarize some of I'm going to give you the broad brushstrokes because we don't have heaps of time. So I want to tell you a little bit about the systematic review. So I wanted to know what measures are being used, not just in speech and language, more behavioural interventions, but also in pharmacological intervention studies and neuromodulation studies that are being done for people with PPA. Now, there was a recent review done of behavioural interventions, so I actually updated that review to include pharmacological and neuromodulation. So I used the same search strategies, and we found more than 2,000 papers that met that the inclusion criteria, which we then examined the titles and abstracts of. So I cross-examined them with a colleague of mine, Dr. Chris Hardy, and then we narrowed it down to about 190. And then we looked at the full texts of these studies, and we're on 145. And having looked at all those papers, I've been extracting. So that's Chris Hardy's work out the way. I'm now extracting all the key information about those measures, particularly what those measures include. And I found 103 different measures so far across those studies. And I just thought I'd tell you a tiny bit about those measures without telling you what they are, just to give you some ideas. But I was particularly interested in what type of PPA was being measured. And you can see here that so there are 3 different types of primary progressive aphasia, each with quite different language profiles. And actually the pink represents I should actually start with, sorry, the light blue, the number 23. These are measures that were used with all people with all different types of PPA. The dark grey represents measures that were used with 2 different types of PPA, and actually the large proportion, so the white, the pink and the darker blue, were only used with 1 type of PPA. So they were PPA specific measures, which started telling me something. I also wanted to know what constructs, like in terms of the ICF, that these measures are looking at. And you can see here the large majority, the light blue, shows that they're actually, the majority are looking at impairment focused outcomes. Pink shows the activity participation outcomes, and the grey and white represent other things. But you can imagine that this light blue probably overlaps quite a lot with these measures for the different that are being used across the different distinct PPA variants. The other thing I was interested in was content validity, internal structure, but I would say in general, I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but most of these measures were actually taken from non-progressive diseases. Some were from the dementia literature more broadly, so there were measures that were used with people with dementia more broadly, but only 1 or 2 were published PPA designed measures. So just to give you an idea of what we're dealing with. So I'm going to move on to the second piece of work I did, asking stakeholders. So that was what the literature said. I wanted to know what people with PPA thought. So this has been a really exciting piece of work, and I have been asking researchers around the world to run nominal groups for me. So run groups using the nominal group technique, I should say. So I've been asking researchers to get together a group of people with PPA and a group of caregivers in each of their countries, and asking them, and I'll show you the question, what would you most like to change about your communication and the way PPA affects your life or the life of your significant other? And then I've been asking those groups so we pose that question, the group discusses it, and then the group basically identify the top 3 areas that they would like to change. So their top 3 outcome domains, things they would like to modify about their life with PPA. Okay, so we've done that across these 2 different groups. And I've managed to recruit many of the, in fact, there's a couple of people here, Adi, I can see, and Monica, have all been part of this work. So we've recruited groups in Israel, Turkey, Norway, America, Canada, Chile, Brazil, Australia, India. I know I'm gonna miss someone out. France, Spain, Portugal, Germany, the Netherlands, England. I feel like I'm doing a European contest, a European Song Contest. I'm sure I've missed someone out, but and we're waiting for data from Iceland and Sweden, who've been our most recent joiners. So we've had representation. The goal was to have representation from across as many World Health Organization regions as the world as we could, and we now have representation across all of them except Africa. And that is not for want of trying. Several people have tried, and I think many of you can probably guess why that may be more difficult, and has told us a lot about that in itself. So what we've done then is we've taken that data from those groups and we've aggregated it. So to identify top 3 items for people with PPA across all these countries. So an international top 3 items. What are the things that people want to change about their lives? And I'm going to share with you, first of all, an overview of what that group looked like, and then I'll tell you what they are. So far we've recruited 73 people with PPA, 91 care partners with an average age of 69 and 61 respectively. You can see, of course, the people with PPA are relatively matched in terms of gender. The care partners are weighted towards female, which is perhaps unsurprising. We've been able to recruit a pretty we recruit people from across the 3 variants of PPA. We have slightly more people with semantic, representing people with semantic and logopenic variant. And that's something to bear in mind. But we also have representation from more mixed or non-specified PPA diagnoses. And on average, people about 2.5, 3 years post diagnosis. And that's another thing to bear in mind when you think about the data that we are looking at. So I'm going to show you the stage 2, so the results. So I'm going to show you the results, remind you what the question is. So I'll share the results from the people with PPA first. Maybe unsurprising, but one of the top items was that people just want to be able to get the words out. People want to be able to talk more with other people, so have more conversations. And then joint third, this is a bit tricky to kind of disentangle, but people want to be more fluent. That was jointly with conveying a message by any means and understand. So there's comprehension rates pretty highly here. And just as a reference back to the beginning, we only found 1 measure looking at comprehension in that review. So interestingly, carers are basically the same in what they rate as the highest items. So carers also want their relatives to be able to get their words out and have conversations with family members and jointly speak fluently or convey a message by any means. So I just wanted to flag here that there's a lot of consistency across groups in the top 3 items. Just to give you a flavour, I have actually got some data on the entire aggregated data from the wider group as it stands at the minute. So I mentioned we have these top 3 items, but then we also have people with PPA flagging that they don't want to get worse. So some of you may have been surprised that there wasn't anything about cure or stopping the disease process. They want to be respected. People with PPA want there to be more awareness of PPA in the wider community. They want to have more speech therapy. They want to be able to use the phone, and they want to know people. They want to have a community. Just to make it clear, I've also tried to stick as much as I can, and despite translation, to the language that people themselves used. Care partners, I've mentioned some of these, but actually care partners also raised a lot of additional items, and this font is a little bit smaller because actually, although there was a lot of consistency in the top 3 across groups, the care partners generated lots more. So there was lots more heterogeneity. So they wanted to talk about behavior changes, deal with sensitive issues, reduce frustration, get more information. They wanted people to be more confident, have be able to express joy, to be partners, not carers. So there's a lot more depth in some of these items. I also wanted to flag that, so these were 2 research studies, but actually in the course of my PPI work, I did a small piece of work with some UK speech and language therapists. We have a UK PPA network, and I was interested in what they would identify as the most important outcome. So I actually asked the exact same question to them. And these are the types of things that were identified. So I find it quite interesting that there is some consistency in terms of word finding, fluency, participation, relationships, maybe conversation we're talking about here, across these groups, although confidence perhaps is something that we didn't see as highly rated in the other 2 groups. So now I took this work to my PPI group of people living with PPA, and they were very interested in these results, but they were the first to point out that this is a huge sample size, which is great, but we're also taking very small sample sizes across lots of different cultures and linguistic populations, and that can also be a limitation. They also flagged many of the people in my PPI group, the stakeholders have got non-fluent variant. And they were saying, they pointed out that actually perhaps the fact that we had more people with logopenic and semantic may have skewed the results to mean that fluency was lower. The other thing to say is all of these groups were run by speech and language researchers or speech and language therapists, which means that all of these groups have had contact with speech therapists. And if we had done this work with people prior to meeting a speech therapist, it might have looked a bit different. And if we perhaps had done it later in the disease process, it might have looked a bit different. But I think one of the strengths is that we actually had speech therapists supporting people with PPA to actually participate in sharing their views and translating it into multiple languages, despite this being quite tricky. So just to kind of flag really that my PPI group really identified that all those factors were both strengths and limitations to the study. So I wanted to, I'm emphasizing that because I think this is a big study, but it's important to emphasize that there are tricky aspects to the size of the study. So what am I doing now? So what we're doing now is I'm interested now to identify how we're going to match this together. How are we going to match the measures to the domains? So I'm now I'm contacting speech and language therapists. I'm contacting researchers. I don't just want to contact speech therapists. I'm also contacting OTs, and so occupational therapists, neuropsychologists, psychologists, neurologists, behavioral neurologists, neuropsychiatrists, anyone who's doing research with people with PPA, and I'll be in touch with several of you. And if I'm inviting people to participate in a Zoom meeting. Now, if those people are able to participate in a Zoom meeting, and they consent to do that, I'm then asking them before they attend to rate the domains and add any gaps to the domains we're identifying. And then once we've rated those domains into them and work out which are most important domains for us to really hone in and identify the measures for, we're then going to talk about, and in some video conferencing meetings, we'll be assigning some measures, which we will then hopefully disseminate, use, and perhaps do more work on. So that's where we're at in this project. So in other words, the majority of measures are focused on word retrieval. That does, in many ways, meet the top priority, but it doesn't meet the range of priorities that people flag as important. And I think what we're seeing is actually that across different PPA variants, we might need to be thinking a little bit about different measures at an impairment-based level versus at different stages. But we're focusing on I'm focusing on the next stage of this study, which is the Delphi consensus. So the Delphi study. So if you would like to be involved, those of you who have been involved previously, so Adi and Monica, you'll be hearing from me, and Carolina, you'll be hearing from me. But if there's anybody who hasn't been involved and would like to at this stage, please get in touch. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was wonderful. And I love the, yes, Eurovision almost listing of countries. It's incredible how international the reach is. It's brilliant. And look forward to the next stage and what you find from the Delphi. In the interest of time, we might move straight on to the next presentation. But if you do have questions for Anna, if you can put them in the chat, or her email was there as well, and I'm sure she'd be happy to follow up in that way. So next up we have Carolina, who's going to be talking about a recently published systematic review on fluency in Alzheimer's disease. Carolina, over to you.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to share now my screen. I don't know where you can see it already. Yes, yep. Do you see the right screen? Yep. Yes. So thank you for the invitation. And also we want to share with you some new results from our group, in which we perform a systematic review of phonological and semantic fluency in Alzheimer's disease. And this is with the enthusiasm to try to highlight language performance as an earlier marker in this group. So as you may know, verbal fluency is a task that is very commonly used for neuropsychologists, neurologists, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists. And since it's such a broad task, and while used in the clinic and also in research, also there's a lot of mistake on how people perform and apply this test. So neurologists, sometimes they use the category of animals, or sometimes they use professions. And sometimes also when the patients come to the clinic to us and we have to specifically assess them for language, then we say, okay, you already have been tested with this, so we're gonna try another category, or we change the letters. So there is a lot of also bad use of this task, but still the center is the same, to evaluate this verbal ability, including this lexical knowledge and the lexical retrieval ability. So what is beautiful from this task is for us it's very useful, because we are evaluating other domains as well, like working memory, attention, control, but most importantly, we're measuring language. So here in Chile, at least, we are trying to seduce the neurologists and also the neuropsychologists to don't extensively use language tests. So when the patients are arriving to our clinic, to our practice, we can focus on that domain. And also sometimes the appreciation of language deficit in these patients when they are with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, it is not really correct. So therefore, here in Chile, we're really keen on saying, like, let's try to build a protocol how we evaluate the language abilities. And therefore, we started with verbal fluency. So that's what we want to share now with you, what we found. Because most of you might think, okay, we are focused sometimes a lot on semantics, and that is true. We focus a lot on semantics, and sometimes we think that is a main feature, but that is when we are going to surprise you now with this systematic review. So there is a lot of effects, as I already explained. One is the way how we apply this task, but also there are other effects on when we perform this task, like the effect of age. Of course, as we age, we are supposed to perform worse. And there are some differences in gender reported in the literature. And of course, there is some influence of the educational level. But we also know that semantic and phonological fluency also rely on different language networks in the brain. So we might think that although we are measuring the same ability, they both rely on different neural bases. So that is also really interesting when we want to make some differentiations for logopenic or agrammatic aphasia PPAs, or other type of dementia that we cannot classify in the earliest stages. So what we did, we were pretty strict, and we started this work in the pandemic. Here in Chile, we were completely locked for almost 2 years. So we, with my students, we performed this systematic review in which we collected, well, more than 5,000 papers, and we started to be really strict on how we select them. So we selected all those papers in which they reported the raw data. Some of the authors reacted to our request of sending the raw data, some others didn't. Also, we have to be very strict in how they perform, how clear they were in the methods. It was only 1 minute allowed to, record the words, or it was, sometimes they use other time window to record the task. So, well, after our really strict criteria, we have to perform an analysis on this really heterogeneous data, and we try to adapt or, well, adjust our results on these 3 variables that I already mentioned that they were important to us: age, educational level, and gender. So probably for some of you that are not really familiar with the systematic reviews, here I'm going to show in the upper part, you see the results of the healthy volunteers. You see in one line, first the semantic fluency, and then the phonological fluency. And then you can see that this performance, it is better on semantic fluency, but it gets a little bit difference from for phonology fluency. So always semantic performance is better. And there is a difference, for example, in healthy volunteers, about 6 words, in which is better for fluency, for semantic fluency than for phonological fluency. And this difference also gets a little bit smaller when we have these people with suspected diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, and also people with mild cognitive impairment. And then you see that also this difference remains. Still, semantic fluency is better than phonological fluency. And then when we have the people with the diagnosis, which is already clear as an Alzheimer's disease, this difference becomes smaller. So there's a difference of 3 words between semantic fluency and phonological fluency. But it's always semantic domain, or let's say the semantic fluency is always better, which for us was really surprising. We really have to correct our analysis that we thought like, no, we always focus in semantic because semantics, this cognitive domain gets worse, but we observed that actually phonological fluency, it's even worse. So what we want to say is that probably we should focus also on phonology. We have been looking too much on semantics. So this is like a way, or like just to raise our hand, like how we are looking at the linguistic domains in the evaluation of our patients with Alzheimer's disease or with the diagnosis of dementia. And this is a way how I summarize it for my students when I show them, the systematic review image, they get panic. So this is a more friendly way how we show that the performance in the beginning, it's better for semantic fluency. It is a domain that actually is better based on our systematic review, but then slowly decreases this performance. But the difference between this performance in semantic and phonological fluency remains, but always gets worse, phonological fluency than semantic fluency. So this is a way how we observe it in our patients, and we are very curious also how we can also use this for the geriatric people, from our colleagues when they are coming, to the, we have a different system probably than in Europe and America. So we're trying to implement in Chile like an early detection. So we are asking the geriatrics to also implement the task, because people here in Chile, when you ask them to perform the MOCA or other these cognitive tests, they already know them because they so well used that they're like, oh no, please not make me drop this again. So we are trying to seduce them to also use this task, because it could be as sensitive as probably these other measurements that we use in the clinic. So our final message is that the performance on semantic fluency and phonological fluency may play a differential role in the early diagnosis. And this is just to highlight, language as one of the markers. And we should be aware that these tasks rely on partially different neural bases of language processing. So there is work to exploring them independently in the diagnosis of aging and in the transition to pathological stages, including Alzheimer's disease, and probably how we can also compare. I don't know, we are thinking right now to start measuring on our patients, make some correlation with cortical thickness and this task, or see, for example, the pattern of activation from different linguistic, phonological, and semantic tasks with the result of our verbal fluency. So I think we have a lot to do there as a speech language therapist, as a neuroscientist. If you have more questions regarding the paper, this is already published and it is online and with open access. It was a big effort for us from Chile to pay the open access, so I really hope that this can be enjoyed by the community. That's all. So thank you for the opportunity to present today. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And I also put a link to the paper in the chat.
Oh, great.
To follow up. But thank you for getting through so much information in such a quick time. And really important to better understand how these different tasks might be reflecting different information and clinical implications. So we might have one question for Anna and one question for Carolina before we wrap up. I realize we're a bit over time, but did anyone have any questions for Anna first? Going once? No? Okay. As I mentioned, you must have just explained everything, Anna, so thank you. And as mentioned, Anna's put her email address there and is happy to follow up, and is also looking for further people to be involved in the next stages of her research. And finally, did anyone have any follow-up questions for Carolina? Well, we might also wrap up then if no one has any. So thank you both very much for presenting. And as I mentioned, this has given a really nice overview of a couple of the projects that our working group is interested in and helping support. Please feel free to come along. So we will, yes, I'm sure people will have other questions. So feel free to come along to our working group meetings. Then you'll be able to hear about other projects and also get involved as well. But just thank you all for coming and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
I'm really sorry. I thought we had an hour, by the way. So I
No,
apologize.
so
No.
it's fine. It's the
You can stop the recording, I think.
yes, hang on.
That was the yeah, I'm